Hey kids, howdy and welcome once again to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. It's August 5th. We're talking about the week from the 5th through the 11th. It's a slim-ish week. It was a crazy new moon yesterday with lots and lots going on in that, so we're going to re-unpack that as we go. But of course, we always start with a question. Sina writes, "Hey, Michael and Zoe, I really enjoyed the podcast and dig the succinct astrology questions lessons. I am coming up upon my solar return, and I am wondering about a solar return chart versus a progressed chart. Are they different? And if so, how? Do you work with either in your practice? Thank you, Sina." I love this question. So these are very distinct, very different snapshot charts. A solar return chart is a chart that you set for your current birthday, and the computer or whatever you're working with will align the sun up with the exact degree and minute placement it was at your birth for the current year. So it's like your birthday moment. And that's usually, the older you are, the further away from your actual birthday moment this is. Like, I'm born on August 23rd in the late afternoon, but my current solar return usually happens the day before on the 22nd. Right? So your solar return doesn't necessarily align with the exact date of your birth. It depends on what time you were born and how old you are. The solar return chart is thought to give a snapshot of the energy of the current year that you're in, sort of year to year, birthday to birthday. There are certain things that you can look at immediately when you cast a solar return chart, like the house placement of the sun. That might say what the theme of the year would be for that person. You could look for each planet placement and interpret some themes of the year based on not only where planets are, what signs they're in, what houses they fall into, and even what aspects they're making. You would look at that chart and interpret it for the time frame of like a few months before the birthday in question through a few months after the next birthday a year later. Another thing that's popular to do with solar return charts is you cast the solar return chart and then you follow the sun's movement for the rest of the year. And that 1, 2, or 3 days after the sun moves into one of the solar return houses, something will arise in that person's experience related to that house. Now, I don't work with solar return charts, mostly because they just seem to be so paltry in what they offer in terms of direct reflection of life unfolding. I like transits because if on a Thursday Mars squares your Uranus, you might have a little car accident. And 3-4 days ago, Mars was squaring my Uranus and I had a little fender bender.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes. I literally woke up that day saying, fuck, Michael, move slow. You're going to have some kind of an accident. And then I had a little thing where I got impatient in an ADHD way, not in like I'm impatient kind of thing where my brain made me do a K-turn to get out of some traffic in a way that like my body did the turning and I couldn't stop it. And I had a little fender bender. That's why I like transit. So solar returns never really yielded me powerful results where I was like, holy shit, this solar return chart really reflected my year from birthday to birthday. It just never did. And one year, about 20 years ago, I was doing the progression of the sun through the charts as an experiment. And indeed, 1 to 3 days after the sun moved into every house, something happened that related to that house, but it was so paltry and insignificant. I thought to myself, who the fuck is valuing from this? I just didn't value from this. There are people who so believe in the power of solar returns, they will they will plan a birthday trip so that their birth date happens on somewhere geographically on the planet to put their solar return sun in a certain house. Right? Say you want to.
Can you explain
Yeah,
that?
I'll give you an example.
That's interesting.
Here's an example. You are single, you want a relationship. So you look up where geographically your solar return would have your sun fall into the 7th house of your solar return chart and be like, this year I'm going to manifest a relationship because I vacationed in Timbuktu. Now,
wow.
I want to be really clear. I've never tried that. I've never spoken to someone who's tried it. I don't want to have contempt prior to investigation. But similar to my like watching, I'm not making this up, but like when the sun moved into my 4th house of home that year, I decided to install a dimmer switch, in the dining room. I mean, I'm making that up. You're saying it was so paltry. So I don't know what the value of going to Timbuktu for your birthday. I would never do that. And so I don't use solar returns, but it's mostly because I haven't seen any direct outrageous value and because I love transits as much as I do. Now, the progress chart, that is something completely different. Progressed charts don't follow the solar system anywhere they go. It's an algorithm placed on the natal chart that artificially moves all the placement of the planets in the natal chart forward based on the Earth's orbit of 1 year. We focus on the sun in Western astrology. Once a year, the Earth moves around the sun, and we have a birthday growing 1 year older and hopefully wiser with each birthday. So the algorithm starts right there. With every birthday you have, your progressed sun moves 1 degree. And then every other planet and point moves at a pace based on its orbit compared to the Earth's orbit, if the Earth's orbit is being expressed as the sun moving 1 degree every day. For every year. So I was born August 23rd, 1963, 30th degree Leo sun. Literally a month later, my progressed sun would have moved into Virgo. And then when I was 1, the progressed sun would have been 1 degree Virgo, then 2, then 3. Right? And then everything else moves at a pace. There's a other way of describing this. If I go to a computer and I set a birth chart, like August 23rd, 1963, and I click the day forward 1 day, the progressed chart after a year will look like the same organic chart on August 24th. In other words, here's a better way of describing it. I'm turning 61 in a few weeks. If we went to my birth chart and clicked the day forward 61 times, that chart, 61 days after August 23rd, 63, will look exactly like my progressed chart for 2024.
Okay, got it.
In fact, there's a thing in the progressed chart called the progressed lunar cycle that has, just like the regular lunar cycle, moments in life where we have an alpha omega startup of some new powerful direction in your life. And then a first quarter and a full moon and a third quarter. Up in the cosmos, it's 28 days, and in the progressed chart, it's 28 years. If you're listening to me on this podcast, it's because in 2018, I had a progressed new moon in my 10th house of work and career, and I expanded my business exponentially. I doubled it twice in 4 years. That's the power of a progressed new moon. Another thing that you use the progressed chart is you look at where progressed charts have aligned to, and when they're touching planet points in the natal chart, big things pop. I could go on and on and on, but I'm not going to do that because we got a podcast to get to, and I have some astrology to talk about, and I'm sure there's a dream on tap. I use the progressed chart with every client I see. I use my progressed chart. The progressed charts are so powerful to describe shifts that happen internally. And then transits describe not just external, because transits also will describe internal experiences that become behavior and events. So you've got progressions that talk about your growth and evolution, transits that talk about what you're dealing with on a Tuesday. And when you use both transit astrology and looking at the progress chart, you have such a comprehensive inside and outside view of where you're at any given moment in life. As I promised at the end of last week's podcast, I would start this week's just by giving a little bit of a review. If you're listening to this podcast anytime after sort of like, 1 o'clock Pacific time on Monday, technically the new moon is over because the moon will have moved into Virgo. But new moons and full moons all have a kind of a 3-day energetic influence. This new moon in Leo hit in the wee hours on Sunday. So by the time this podcast comes out, it's about 12 hours in. If you're listening to this on Monday, it's about 1 day in. And we are still in intention setting mode of how we want to utilize our Leo consciousness. Leo is where we're willing to put ourselves front and center and shine brightly to be visible and extroverted. Leo invented creative self-expression. Putting yourself front and center is also akin to leadership. I'm an anoretic Leo. I've been, standing in the center, making other people invisible for, 60, almost 1 years. So not everybody will identify with Leo energy as shiny and bright and extroverted like I am, but all of us have the area where we are, in fact, willing to be front and center a little bit more. That might be reflected by the Leo house in your natal chart. So if you know that, look it up. Use that information to sort of guide your intention setting. What area of consciousness is ready to expand into sort of visible presence? If you are listening to this podcast and you relate to being somebody who's a kind of more inhibited energy in terms of gregariousness, it might really be a good idea to look up what house is ruled by Leo in your natal chart. Just to sort of focus on, the area of your life where intentions will best be received based on your individual makeup. But you can't go wrong if you just focus on what brings you joy. Leo invented the idea that life is a joyful ride. So all of the things that we think of as joyful are under Leo's sort of domain, like creative expression, being creative for creativity's sake, sex, children, just all the joyful, playful things that life offers is a Leo consciousness. The new moon energy trined the north node of the moon, which means that intentions we set have a kind of easy trajectory forward. As long as you're setting intentions for something that is really yours to have, because if it ain't yours, it ain't coming. But if it is yours, the trine from the new moon to the north node sort of ensures it's coming to you. A trine from the new moon to Chiron sort of means, less wound is there to interfere with your ability to set intentions to receive something yummy. Because, again, you can't receive something you don't feel deserving of receiving, or you can receive it, but you can't keep it. The trine from the new moon and Venus in Leo to Chiron sort of sets us up to be relatively wound-free. And there's this sort of grand sextile being formed with the new moon, including Venus in Leo. 60 degrees later, give or take a few degrees, is the conjunction between Mars and Jupiter in the sign of Gemini. So Mars is how we're going to make the things happen. If you set an intention with the Leo new moon, Mars is going to be the part of your consciousness that does the doing, if there's doing needed. And Jupiter being right nearby says it can be big and expansive and fabulous. And then 60 degrees later is this north node of the moon that says, and we take all of this into the future. I even like how Saturn is participating in this new moon. And I'm not even sure if I mentioned this in the podcast last week, but where the new moon is at 12 degrees of Leo is an inconjunct, the eliminator angle, with where Saturn is in Pisces. That means that from our place of wisdom, that is, we've learned a thing or two, and therefore we're now ready to set intentions that reflect the wisdom we've garnered from what we've learned, how we've healed, the things we've investigated in the last periods of time, weeks, months, and years, allow us to make new choices. Especially after 2 Capricorn full moons in a row where we really shifted things that we needed to shift that would allow us to have the sort of self-care and preparation needed to climb more powerfully up the mountain of our desires. And 2 of them in a row really helped us do the surgery needed to make new choices. And remember, Capricorn is ruled by Saturn, so Saturn was in charge of the last 2 full moons. So if you showed up to the last 2 full moons really ready to just open your psyche up and let some old shit go, you're in that position that I just described. From new wisdom and Saturn effort, you're ready to make new choices, and who better but to take those choices into the future and have those choices be yummy than Leo. Leo says, I count, I'm front and center, what do I want? Now let's make it and make it big. And we're doing a better job of it because we've learned a thing or two. And then just after the new moon happened, we had the sort of beautiful complications of Venus changing signs and moving into Virgo, and Mercury in Virgo already turning around and going retrograde. And let's unpack that a little bit. Mercury retrograde and Venus come together by conjunction in Virgo on Wednesday. This is a pretty big deal, not because of the transit itself, although it's a beautiful opportunity always when Mercury and Venus connect by conjunction, which they do fairly frequently because, Venus takes a year to move around, Mercury zips around in 88 days. They're meeting up a lot. And when they do, we get an alignment of mind and heart, which is something we always have to work on, which I think is sort of ironic that we have to work on this constantly, and constantly the solar system is giving us the archetypal opportunity to do so by making sure that Mercury and Venus keep meeting up every few months. And this is because we need to think what we're feeling, feel what we're thinking, speak from our feelings truthfully. If you want something in your mind, but your feeling body doesn't feel deserving of it, that ain't gonna work. If you say yes when you feel no, that's gonna fuck you up in all the things, all the ways that people struggle with having mind and heart in the same place gets aligned when Mercury and Venus come together. The fact that it's happening in the sign of Virgo means it's a healing opportunity, right? Because Virgo, co-ruled by Chiron, is a mansion of process, integration, putting things back together again. So if Humpty Dumpty is where the egg falls off the fence and gets broken, it's in Virgo that the king's men and folk put them together again. So if there's been some out of alignment in the last couple of months with everything we've been going through with how you think and how you feel, that process this week will help that happen because Mercury's backward moving. There's going to be unconscious material triggered this week that will be part of Mercury's retrograde cycle. So in some ways, I'm talking about things that will happen as we pass through Wednesday, meaning the whole week, as we get through this whole week. There are going to be things that are going to be happening in the underbelly of your psyche that relate to getting mind and heart into alignment that you might not know or get fully until Mercury comes out of his retrograde at the end of August and into September. They're only going to meet up this one time. Venus is going to keep going and Mercury's moving backwards. And so when Mercury comes back this way again, Venus is far off ahead. Mm-hmm. Right now, Neptune is hanging out at the final 30th mastery degree of Pisces. He's been there for a while. He'll be there for a while longer. He's moving in and out of Aries next year. So he's spending a lot of time at this mastery degree. This is a very valuable placement for us because it allows us to get connected to spirit in the most unobstructed way possible. That 30th degree of Pisces is the juiciest point in the whole zodiac, where we are directly connected to the void, to all possibility, to the all with a capital A, right before anything can become form, which is what happens at the 0 degree of Aries. But so Neptune, our spiritual connection, giving us a greater access to that aspect of our humanity all year. Pluto, very active last year and this year, moving in and out of Capricorn and Aquarius, making an enormous shift on the planet occur by virtue of the planet of change and transformation visiting, 2 mansions. So with Pluto now at 0 degrees of Aquarius and moving backwards, he's moving backwards towards 29 Capricorn, which he'll do in I think October. These 2 planets are holding a powerful sextile. So you've got Neptune in Pisces and Pluto in Aquarius, 60 degrees apart, 61 technically, but that still counts, where change and transformation and our willingness to sort of die to self to be reborn, Pluto, and our spiritual connection that says there is no death, in fact, and as you surrender to be died, to be killed, to be reborn, you're actually throwing yourself into the hands of the divine. And so these 2 pieces working together is like an incredibly productive motor for change and transformation that happens to the deepest level possible, supported by deep beliefs. Where Mercury and Venus are gathering in Virgo is forming a loose but palpable finger of God, a long, narrow triangle where the pointy end, and newly aligned hearts and minds move someplace they need to go, and we are supported then by deep spiritual connection and our willingness to change in order to move in new directions. So remember, this is all in the thrust of a new moon that sort of hits 4 days before this Wednesday's experience of mind and heart in alignment. And so we get to take the wave of new moon energy into the lunar cycle itself and experience this alignment of mind and heart that is also accompanied with change the track you're on if you need to and allow things to die and be reborn. Change the track you're on to your spiritual connection so that you remember that you can jump off the cliff because you're only 4 feet from the ground. You're holding onto a branch and spirit knows that you're safe. Now, in case you're looking for this week to yield you something really clear and specific, as a result of or as a reflection of the setup that I'm describing, I'm calling this the more will be revealed yod. It is a yod, it is a figure of God, but it's got Neptune at the 30th degree of Pisces, which means the fog machine is fully turned on. Spirit is saying, trust me. Pluto is saying, trust me, while he's got a hand around our throats. And Mercury's retrograde. So we really can't know the shifts and changes that are happening in our hearts from this week, this first week of Mercury's retrograde and this new moon artifact. But when we get to the end of the lunar cycle and Mercury's retrograde is all over, trust me, some measure of how you align mind, heart, change, and spirit will have you moving in new directions as a result of energies you pass through this week. There's very little happening in 2024 that's coming from the social and outer planets making big planetary pictures. 2020 and 21 were huge for big honkin' transits. 2025 and 2026 are maybe even bigger in some ways. And these couple of years in between, not so much. And that makes sense. If you look back at 2020, we were in a boatload of change, 12 out of 10. Where we're going, I promise, is going to bring us experiences we have not seen before and don't even think are possible. And that might be a little scary for some, stick close by. Me, I will tell you the truth, but also keep hope and resilience in the room as well. But this year and last year, we aren't working with any big honking planetary movement that's universal or collective that we're all working with. That said, there are 2 Jupiter transits that are happening this month that also both happen a second time in December that are going to mark the general pace of how well we can expand the things we're looking to make bigger and better and more of in our lives. That's a Jupiter consciousness. So as Jupiter moves, we grow, we get more, we win the lottery. But Jupiter isn't alone up there. Jupiter's making contact with other planets. And there's a sesquisquare between Jupiter and Pluto that hits also on Wednesday of this week. Jupiter's a fast-ish moving planet, so in some ways this is really just reflecting the last couple of weeks and maybe one more week ahead, though this energy will return in December because of retrograde motion. This is one of those pace-setting transits that describes the idea that power struggles might impede your growth or movement. Jupiter says, move, grow, go. Pluto says, pay the toll, die the death, gotta change. Jupiter says, I want this. Pluto says, you're not quite ready to have that. You need to dig a deeper hole if you want to plant a seed that grows a tree that big. So, if you've been bumping up against any obstacles to your forward sense of possibility, certainly in the first half of August, the question you want to be asking yourself is, am I really ready? What needs to change in my life in order for me to have the things that I desire? And if you don't know the answer to that question, but you do feel yourself a little stymied, this is a perfect question to ask your intuitive guidance or your oracle cards, and that would be the question. What needs to change in order for me to have a more expanded experience of my manifested desires and have at it? And just know the pace that the world sets is coming from a divine origination, and we often receive delays as if they are our fault. Now, that doesn't mean that some of us are still sabotaging our expansions or getting in our own way. But sitting in the chair that I sit in day after day for the last 30 years, what I see more is people judging themselves and blaming the pace on their own inadequacies. And stop that. How the fuck are you going to know when you're really getting in the way of yourself if you think you're getting in the way of yourself with every thought you have? Something to consider. On August 7th, Wednesday of this week, when mind and heart will be in a beautiful alignment and Pluto and Jupiter are kind of saying, oh, shit, things aren't moving as fast as I want. You get to meditate into your inner landscape and ask yourself the question, what needs to change in order for me to have what I desire? Then change that and have at it.
Did you know that Michael has a daily astro alert? If you enjoy hearing the weekly astrology, you might like knowing more about each day. When you subscribe for the daily astro alerts, you'll get an in-depth explanation of the day's astrology sent right to your email. Subscriptions are only $10 a month, or you can purchase the yearly subscription at the reduced price of $100. To subscribe, head over to michaellennox.com. All right, it's dream segment time. Every week, Dr. Michael will interpret dreams that are sent in via email or take a live caller. If you would like your dream interpreted on the podcast, you can go ahead and email us at dreams@michaellennox.com. Hopefully your dream will make it onto the show. Today we have a call-in dreamer. Hey Melissa, what you dreaming?
Hello, very nice to see you both. This is actually an old dream. When I was in my probably late teens, I'd say, I used to have recurring dreams of being shot. It never hurt, and I would look down at my upper abdomen and I would hold it and I'd look around for help and I would say, I wasn't upset, I wasn't frightened, I was just like, oops, I need help. And that was sort of the dream for a while. And then occasionally it would change up, I'd get stabbed. But again, it was never particularly stressful, all things considered. And then one day I had a dream. I was in a religious encampment of some sort, surrounded by white buildings, dressed nothing woo, just kind of wearing, like white carpenter's pants and a long sleeve shirt. And I was walking around and a bunch of armed men came into our little compound. They were shooting people and they shot me and I died. And then I rose up out of my body and I looked back at them, dragging my body away by my feet. And I said, oh, I am so going to haunt your asses. And that was the end of the dream. And then I don't believe that I had any other dreams of being shot after I had that dream. So I had brought that up to a friend recently because, it stuck with me, much like you talk about some of your early dreams stick with you. Yep. And I told a friend about this and he said, oh, that's probably a past life memory. And I said, well, I don't know. So I thought I would see what your input was.
So the idea was that religious encampment dream might have been a past life dream. Is that what we're saying?
That's his theory. I really don't know. I honestly don't have any input on that.
Well, did the dream have, based on just hearing it from you, it's like, well, that doesn't jump out at me. But I'm curious if maybe the way you were describing the dream to your friend might have given a bigger sense of this encampment that you describe as having a kind of agency or solidity as a place.
Maybe to him it was meaningful that way. It didn't strike me as anything familiar to me, but the details were very clear at the time.
And would you describe then, therefore, that those clear details as if it was describing the environment?
Yeah, I could see where I was walking. I remember the sort of dirt and gravel roads, white painted bricks on the buildings, things like that.
Okay, so that kind of specificity often does give a signal that there might be something like a past life experience going on. Dreams, even very vivid ones, because that's what we usually come out of a dream describing, a vividity or a lack of vividity, does not distinguish between details that look cogent, like, oh, this is an environment that might exist. Because a very vivid dream can also be crazy and chaotic and go to all kinds of weird places. So we know that we're in the face of a different kind of dream when we're not in chaos or not in sudden shifts. There isn't a clown car and an upside down moment, right? So then when I'm hearing a dream, that's the first signals I usually experience where I think, oh, this might be a past life. And so the way you described it initially to me just now on the call didn't really offer that, except that now that we've talked a little bit more about it, that kind of detail does sometimes spell that we have visited a place that has more of a cogent existence than some random chaotic landscape inside of your deep psyche. So I can't guarantee that this is a past life dream, but that's how I distinguish. It's like when I'm listening to a dream. If it sounds like a chaotic dream, and I've heard thousands and thousands of them, right? So we know what they sound like and feel like. The minute somebody starts describing an environment and the context of the dream isn't taking you out of that environment, that's one signal.
Okay.
Clearly, another thing to think about in dream phenomena is the cessation of the earlier dreams once you had this one.
Okay.
Right? That's what you described, right? You said that
Yeah, absolutely.
How old were you when you had the religious encampment dream?
I'd say late teens, 18, 17, somewhere in there.
Okay. So the value of a recurring dream, so now I'm referring to what it felt like in all of those dreams earlier when you were injured but not in any kind of pain, those are usually stress dreams. We grab an image in our psyche, the brain sort of says, oh yeah, this works, Melissa's in some stress, let's give her this dream. And this is a dream, if I were to interpret as a kind of helpful recurring dream, it would be your psyche helping you understand that the various injuries and hits that we receive along the line, along the way in our lives aren't really hurting us as much as the perception of the hurt.
Okay.
Like that would be how I would interpret such a dream. It's like, I got shot. That's bad. It doesn't feel awful or injurious in the dream. That's like an instruction.
Okay.
When we're hurt, it's not as bad as we think. And right? And the soul sort of teaches you that.
And it would also make sense from the point of view of looking around for help and not feeling like I had the support, feeling like I needed to do it myself.
Right. So then we can get into the psyche of Melissa as a kid. It's like she, feels alone in those moments. She knows she's okay, but she's not finding help. So then we have this other dream that somehow we are being asked to consider in a different way. It's more vivid. It's more composed as a location. And more importantly, it stopped the recurring dreams of being shot.
Yes.
So that has to have some significance. Now, if I say to you, I know exactly what that significance is, I'd be full of hubris. Like, how would I know? I'm just a guy who loves dreams and has a self-proclaimed gift for interpreting them. I had no degree in psychology, so I know a little bit about the human experience. I would say that the literality of this event of being shot, and let's just pretend for a moment that this was a past life dream, that the past life dream was somehow knitting together some piece of wisdom that came from that life that you needed in this life. Maybe it's even about, the finality of things or how to be with conflict or the idea that we die, that somehow something of comfort was installed into you because you never had the dream again.
Okay, that's interesting.
So past life or psychological maturing moment? I don't know, maybe a little of both?
That makes sense. And maybe some of the imagery of rising above it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like this, you think you did something here, and I'm letting you know you didn't. And there are going to be energetic consequences. That's sort of adorable, the threat. The threat to haunt. But, it's like if in a woo-woo sort of way, we bring certain conflicts into our incarnation from other incarnations, if that's true, because we'll never really know, it's a mystery. But if that's so, maybe it's possible that in a past life where you died by shotgun in some kind of a weird, circumstance in a religious encampment, that you, Melissa, bring in some of the fear of being shot from that past life, and it inches into your psyche until it's ready to be healed somehow, where you in this life are also working with another life where something heals both lives. And that happened in your late teenage years, and having the actual dream where you remember the past life moment of death is not that different than, say, me taking somebody through one of my classes and have them remember in a deep way a core wound that happened when they were 4, and then suddenly they're more integrated because they visited the injury.
Okay.
What if that capacity to visit injury can transcend lives? So the first dreams that would pop in during your childhood were that effort of that past life trying to get you to notice it so that it could have a healing. And that big dream in the religious encampment was the moment that the past life energy reached your psyche, and somehow that created a healing, and you no longer had to do that thing for the agreed upon soul agreement that might have existed.
Okay, very interesting. Can I ask you a slightly separate but related question?
Sure.
Why do some people seem to suffer from nightmares? And so I rarely do. I could count on one hand the actual nightmares. I've had unpleasant dreams, but rarely nightmares. Even in these cases, I was never terrified.
That's
you have any
interesting.
theory?
Well, this is what I do know about dreamers and dreams is that there are styles of dreaming, and that I dream about being in community. Every dream's about I'm in community, I'm in community, I'm in community. I happen to also know that Neptune, the planet that represents dreaming, is in my 11th house in my natal chart. And the 11th house represents community.
Oh, wow.
And so I don't have any more to say about this than that, Melissa, but I'll tell you, I'm fascinated by your question because literally just in the last week or two from recording this experience with you, I had the thought, I wonder if the Neptune placement in a natal chart might describe someone's dream style. I dream of community, and my dream planet is in the 11th house of community. Maybe someone with Neptune in the 8th of change and transformation might have more nightmares than someone who doesn't, But again, I've not explored this. This is just something I've been marinating on at the time when you asked me the question. So what I'll say in a cogent response is everybody has a style. Your style happens to be less nightmarish, where another person who has a lot of nightmares might just be stylistically expressing how they express. And then there might be things that the more conflicted person is going to have more nightmares because nightmares are a reflection of underlying conflict that's, below the surface. And there might be something to that too. And there might be psychologists who actually spend their life in research who could answer such a question from a more scientific place than I. But
it's very interesting. The idea of different dream styles is just like different artwork styles for creative outlets. So that's a really interesting idea. Now I'm going to have to go look at my Neptune placement.
There you go. And then maybe have some interesting dreams that reflect your, what you learned. So, and I think that both questions, your dream question of like, do we head into past lives? And the other dream question of like, why do people have different themes speak to the incredible mystery and power of dreaming, and that we know very little. And our job is just to appreciate and dance with them in the way that they speak to us. So thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing yours. This was great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. You can find us on Apple Music, the iHeartRadio app, and anywhere you find your favorite shows. Head on over to michaellennox.com for information on astrology readings, the Daily Astro Alert subscription, upcoming classes, and to join the mailing list.